Welcome back, guys. I have my friend Max Freeman here today, and we're
Hello.
going to be talking about a lot of interesting things that have not been discussed on this channel yet. And Max, why don't you just tell me a little bit about like your journey and the things that you're going through?
Well, so like for me personally, one of the biggest challenges I've had in the past 10 years is with alcoholism. And it's just been an on and off battle for 10 years. Currently, right now, I'm at 2 months sober, which is a huge win for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I'll say I've got a lot of experience with failure, but I've got a lot of experience with picking myself back up. So I just, I refuse to quit.
How did you get into it? Like what led you to alcoholism?
So for me, I struggle a lot with anxiety, depression, ADHD. These are all things that have been diagnosed with by psychiatrists. For me, it was just my first year of college. I decided to go to a house party, and it was my first time ever drinking. I had like 6 beers and 3 shots of Bacardi, and I ended up throwing up. That for sure.
You did or did it?
No, I threw up like all over the place in that house, and it was just like that. To me, should have been my first warning sign. Hey, maybe you're like, because for me it's like, oh, I don't feel it, and then all of a sudden I feel it, and then bam, I'm in the toilet. So
yeah.
But no, I did just the next day. It was like all I wanted to do was wait until like Friday or Saturday, which is weird because you'd think after getting sick like that, you would not want to do it again.
Yeah.
But for me, that the elevations, the in the moment feeling, you have increased euphoria, increased dopamine, your anxiety low, you'll say whatever comes to mind, and that's just a nice feeling for me because it's like, oh, now I don't care, I'll just say whatever I want. But in the moment, I don't realize the consequences of that.
Totally.
So
essentially, you were pretty much hooked like right off the bat.
oh yeah, definitely. That very first semester of college, it was every weekend going out, getting wasted. They're blacking out a couple of times, so I have triggers on both my mother and my father's side.
Okay.
So my father actually died from alcoholism.
Oh man.
So you would think that would have kept me away from it. Kept me away from it in high school. So about 19 to 21 is when I really had my first experience. And then I met my girlfriend at the time and moved back up here. I was living in Texas. I moved back up to Utah in 2015. And then for 4 years I was sober.
Really?
Didn't touch alcohol. I had quit vaping, quit everything.
Holy.
So I was sober for 4 years, and then we broke up. We got a really rough breakup.
Right.
And then, unfortunately, I was like, oh, well, now that, because she was basically saying, this isn't good for you, you have these tendencies, so don't do them. And I wanted to keep her more than I wanted the drugs and alcohol. So I did that. But then once we had our breakup and all that, it was like, oh, well, she was the only reason why I didn't do these things, so just went straight back to it. And then from the year 2019 till now has been the biggest real struggle.
You touched on something that's really important, is that you were sober for 4 years, but it was because of someone else.
Right.
I remember in my past 2 relationships, both women have said, you've got to do these things for you. And I'd be like, oh yeah, sure, like cool. And I'd make changes, I'd make corrections, right? But it wasn't lasting because ultimately it was for us, right? And it was for them. And
that's what you told yourself, it was for both of you, but in reality it was for them.
Exactly. And that leads to what I call speed healing, right? Where it's like you're doing things for, it's not necessarily the wrong reasons, but it's not sustainable reasons.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like at the end of the day, breakups happen, right? You lose things that you want to keep, and then you're just stuck with yourself. And when you just have yourself and all of the work you've done is in that pot that just ran away, like now what do you have? You're literally back to square one.
Exactly. Yep, and that's a really good way to put it, because I didn't really, like my real healing journey didn't start until basically the beginning of this year is when I really decided, okay, hey, I really need to like figure something out here, because it was every day, or binge patterns, let's say that, because that is how it was drinking heavily for about a week, maybe 2, and then taking a break for 3 or 4 days.
Yep.
Because as I got older, my body can't handle it as much anymore. And but it just kind of was like that for a little while, and it's like, why am I doing? Because it got to the point where I shifted from wanting the initial feeling of the euphoria and dopamine hits to actually like disliking so much how I felt the next day, like no energy, sleeping till like noon or 1, when I fell asleep at like 8 or 9 at night, like, and then a lot of the time too was drinking alone, because I really got into that too a lot.
Very dangerous.
And would end up just getting on the phone and calling people I shouldn't be calling, and then texting people I shouldn't be texting.
Yeah, man.
And it was just, I mean, the biggest struggle for me, and you have a video about anxiety, and I know you struggle with anxiety as well, is it all stemmed for anxiety. It was trying to alleviate that symptom. It's like, okay, when I drink, I'm not anxious, but when I drink, I say stupid stuff. You know, so
right.
it was very trying to shift from wanting that initial feeling more than the after effects to realizing the after effects were way worse than those initial feelings. Exactly. So now what I do that has helped me be 2 months sober, which is the longest, by the way. I've been sober probably 4 or 5 years now. 2 months is the longest I've made it. The one thing that has helped me the most is that I literally will sit here and I'll tell myself, okay, these are your feelings that you get, that you want in the moment, but these are the feelings you get afterwards. And every single time I sit here and I'm like, oh man, I could really go for a drink right now. I'm like, like, because yes, I'm gonna alleviate my anxiety. Yes, I'm gonna feel a lot better, and you know, everything's gonna be great in the moment. But that next day, I can guarantee I'm gonna feel like crap. Most likely gonna throw up, because that's just how it's been lately.
When you have that perspective of like, okay, what's my end goal here, instead of like, what does my gratification want?
Exactly.
That's huge, and that I think comes with just like maturity in general.
Age helps.
Experience, and you know, just like I've always said, being sick of your own garbage. Like if you're just doing the same thing over and over again, getting the same results, like something's got to change, right? And so being able to step back, hey, I really want to drink. Hey, I really want to watch porn. Hey, I really want to do this, and think about, okay, in 24 hours, like what is this going to do to me, right? How am I going to feel? What is this going to, you know, is this going to affect my healing journey negatively, right? And obviously, like the healing journey is not linear. Like mine has been like this and like all over the place. But like when you have that perspective, you're able to actually sit back and have a little bit more self-control, in my opinion. What have been some of the hardest parts about your addiction recovery?
The hardest parts for me are always just been consistency. Consistency has been the biggest thing I've lacked throughout. And so for me, it's like, yes, I can stay sober for 3 or 4 days at a time. I've done it before plenty of times, but I'll jump right back on it. And so what I kept telling myself, oh yeah, I can quit whenever I want, because I could,
right?
Temporarily. And so unfortunately, over time, it took me a long time. Like I said, it's taken me till about this year until I really started to put all the pieces together for why I struggled so much. But really the consistency factor has been the biggest challenge. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah. You know, I can go through the really rough parts, the physical parts of the withdrawal process, but I had no game plan for the, like, so it's like, okay, you know, 4 days down the road now, I needed to change habits. I needed to have now whenever I get the urge to drink, if I can't overpower it with the pros and cons list, then I just go for a walk, or I call up a friend, or I just jump on the computer and start playing video games, anything to keep my mind busy away from that thought. And the biggest challenge, like I said, yeah, consistency, 100%. And consistency is the only way you're going to conquer addiction, because you have to consistently stay with it. It's an everyday 24-hour process.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's a saying out there that goes like, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yep.
Right. And that's been like beat into me since I was a kid. And I grew up as a Boy Scout, and like it's always like, be prepared, and you know, all that. If you're having just motivation alone is not going to be able to help you get over your addictions. It's not going to be able to help you heal in general, because like there's several stages of healing. Like the first stage is like, boom, that rock bottom. Second stage is, I feel like, the motivation stage, where like you're like gathering information and you're like, okay, this is what's wrong. You're maybe watching YouTube videos and you're getting inspired. You've got this resolve and you're like, all right, And that's a dopamine hit in and of itself.
It is.
And then stage 3 is like, okay, now I have to execute. And that's where most people fall off. So, you know what I mean?
So easy to talk about everything you're going to do and you're all hyped up and you're ready to go. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now it's time to do it.
Whoops. Exactly. I can quit anytime. Yeah.
Yeah. That was the biggest lie I ever told myself. And like, yes, this is a little, I don't know if it's unusual. Maybe some people can share that same feeling. For me, is like, I could quit whenever I wanted to, but I would just get right back on it again after 3 or 4 days because I had no plan for the long run.
Exactly. You had no plan, and you also had no vision too.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I've been there, like just like completely living in the moment and just letting life happen to you instead of like controlling what happens in your life. Obviously, there's stuff out of our control. We've talked about that here, but like being more of like the steward of your actions and the steward of like
how you respond.
Yeah, how you respond and negative consequences of your own garbage. Like it's a big deal. Going into the execution stage, it's like, oh, this is why I haven't done it before, because it's freaking hard. You know what I mean? This is why I haven't done it until now. Like until these last 2 months, this is why I have not done it. And yeah, it's tough, but it's worth it.
At least for me, the hardest part is just like actually moving forward with that execution. Once you move forward with it and you're in it and you're doing it, it's a lot easier to maintain. It's just initializing it, getting it there, like just getting to the point where you can actually move forward with it and you are moving forward with it. Because once you actually start doing it, it becomes way easier.
Exactly.
But that initialization stage where you're like, now where you actually have to make that decision to execute, that's the hardest part, at least for me.
Exactly. Like, what's the hardest part about going to the gym? Driving there.
Hardest part about going to work? Getting up and driving there.
Exactly. And then once you're there, it's like, okay, I can do this.
Yep.
Earlier, we talked a little bit about like the balance between looking in hindsight and like seeing what we've done wrong, and then also pushing forward and correcting those things. Sometimes I feel like the polarity can be thrown off because you're spending too much time in hindsight. You know what I mean?
100%. So like an equilibrium where, so there's the side where you feel driven, you're ambitious, you're trying to conquer the world, your ego is inflated, that kind of side. I mean, arrogance, confidence, like it's hard to differentiate between the two. Then you have the other side where you reach complete 100% humility. You're completely humble. Your ego has been shattered. The only problem with all, especially if like with me, where my ego went from being all the way up here to just completely down here, is I got trapped in that humility side. And like you were saying, getting right there to that middle point is so important. So it's like trying to be more confident and ambitious without getting overzealous with your ego.
Right.
And then on the other side, also being able to recognize your shortcomings and understand that you make mistakes. You have to have limits on your ego, because if you get too crazy and then you hit that failure part, it's going to hit your ego all the way back down. And then you're going to end up over here instead of here. And here in the middle is where you need to be. So for me, the biggest struggle is like with my addiction, the mistakes I've made throughout my life, my breakup that I had that, was the most, like I've only had one serious relationship, and that breakup completely destroyed my ego. Totally. And so I ended up more on that side where I was like, okay, this is good for me. Now I've got to slowly build myself back up. And that still is a challenge even now, but just staying away from substances, I'm like being able to see parts of my brain and being able to see how I function and do things that I never knew about myself before.
One thing that came to mind as you were talking, so your issue, or one of your issues, is alcohol addiction. I've talked about a lot of my issues here. One of the big things that is in common with everything is that once you identify and you put forth a game plan and you conquer these things, you start to become who you are. Like, you start to be authentic.
Exactly.
Right? Because your blockers was alcohol. My blockers was codependency, anxiety, a ton of things, right? Pornography. I had a ton of blockers. And then once you handle those things, you start like blooming. You start like just settling into who you were meant to be.
Yep.
Right? You become authentic. Some people like are like, who are you now? Right? And they may not like it, and that's okay. Whatever it is, once you handle it and once you actually put in the work, you become yourself.
Exactly. And the thing is, you'll lose people, but you'll also gain people too.
Where do you see yourself going forward in the future now?
So right now, I'm actually in a really exciting time because I'm a junior in college for accounting, which most people are like, that sounds awful, dude. Why would you want to do that? But I mean, stuff makes sense to me. I like it. I enjoy it. So I'm really looking at internships here moving into 2025, and I'm really wanting to take off with my career and actually be where I feel like I should have been 10 years ago. Like, you know, if somebody was to ask me when I was 20 years old and ask me where I saw myself in 10 years, because I'm 30 now, and I look at myself now versus back then, this is not where I would want to be. But I have an opportunity to create something, and it's never too late. It's like, okay, now where do I see myself at 40? I see myself with a successful career. I mean, whatever happens, maybe I will finally feel like I'm ready to pursue a relationship. Maybe I'll have a family. I don't know. That's all in the future. But right now, I feel like I have a really exciting opportunity to finally get in gear and actually start working towards a career and what I want my life to be moving forward, away from drugs and substance abuse.
You said somewhere where I wanted to be 10 years ago. That's what I'm doing now. Here's the thing. You have experience now, right? You have wisdom now. Everything happened for a reason. Every sip of alcohol you have ever drank has led you to this point now, right? Obviously, you've gone through a lot of pain. You've gone through a lot of struggle, but that was all for a purpose, and you're making that purpose now.
Yep.
Right?
I would agree with that.
It's not in vain because of what you're doing now.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And that's one, actually, I really like that he has touched up on that, because that is something that everybody should tell themselves. It's like, it is never too late to start making progress. Never too late to start wanting, or if you've had a dream that you've never acted on, and no matter how old you are, act on it. Do it. Put it in motion. Like, it is never too late to do something. Mm-hmm. Never too late to make something of yourself.
Exactly.
And everything you had previously before, all that negative experience can be turned into a positive one to get you moving forward.
That's one of the main reasons for this channel, is to help people understand that what they've done, what they've experienced, doesn't necessarily define them, right? What defines you is what you're going to be doing moving forward. And that's, I think, the most important part of healing real life, is that you can heal at any time. You can heal at 30, you can heal at 90. Thanks so much for coming on the channel, man. I really appreciate you. You're sharing your journeys, your struggles.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.
That stuff is not easy. It's hard to talk about sometimes, but thank you for being brave, and thank you for doing it.
Of course.
I hope you guys have a safe new year, and until I see you next, chin up, deep breath, let's heal in real life.